Hello and good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for a virtual alumni workshop on designing your resume. Well, my name is Molly Clevin, and I'm from the University of Minnesota Duluth Alumni Relations team. And today we're going to hear from Jill Kolodzne, Director of UMD Career and Internship Services, on how to tailor your resume and highlight skills that employers want. You'll walk away with valuable insight, no matter if you're a recent graduate or looking for a career change. Now to introduce our guest. Today we are joined by Jill Kolodzne, the Director of UMD Career and Internship Services here at UMD. Over the last 10 years, Jill's career journey includes working career services at UMD and Fort Lewis College, plus almost 10 years with the Student Conservation Association. With 18 years of experience developing internship programs for college-age students through partnerships between higher education, nonprofits, businesses, federal agencies, state agencies, and tribal nations, Jill's passion is helping people on their career path to connect with opportunities. It is now my pleasure to welcome and hand it over to Jill.
Thanks, Molly. Appreciate that. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. If you have questions, please add those in the chat, and we'll have some time at the end to answer some more. And I have slides for about 30 minutes. Depending on the questions that come in, it might take a little bit longer. So thanks for being here today. So as Molly said, we're going to talk a little bit about job search, resume tips, the skills employers want and will be wanting, how to highlight your experience and your questions. Everybody has their own career journey story. In the pictures here, I started out in one of my careers doing trail work and leading conservation corps, hence the little trike. I also had a stint as a wildland firefighter. There's all sorts of ways you use your skills that you have in all parts of your career to get to where you are now, being the Director of Career and Internship Services. I've built on all sorts of skills over my career journey. So I just want to, encourage you to know that whatever you're doing now might be completely different 10 years from now, and how to talk about those things depending on where you're at. For me, I like some context. I like a little bit more narrowing of all of the things. So I thought starting with a slide on knowing what you want might be helpful. I used to always be like, I need this, I need this. My dad would always interrupt and be like, is this a need or a want? Do you really need that, whatever item? And I'd be like, okay, really, it's more a want. So thinking about what are those minimums, like the things I have to have when you're looking at your job search, and what are the things that would be nice? Three of the buckets I wanted to talk about were employer type. What kind of organization do you want to work for? Or do you want to work a federal, state, a corporation, a small business, nonprofit? Do you want to create your own business? There's all sorts of different reasons and ways you'd be looking for different opportunities. Or are you open to multiple things? So thinking about your resume for each of those situations is a good place to start. Also, what kind of benefits are important to you? Do they have tuition reimbursement? What kind of vacation are you getting? Are you traveling all the time? And then other things that they have as part of their community and the culture at the employer that you're looking at. What's important to them? How do they support the communities that they are in? What kind of support do they have for their employees? Both with affinity groups and professional development, and then also flexible work schedules. So those are starting points to think about things that are important as you're looking for those things that are going to be interesting to you. And then thinking about which type of job search engine you're going to use based on that previous slide. Like, these are the things I'm thinking of. For everybody that is a UMD student or alumni, we have access to Handshake. This used to be called Gold Pass, powered by Handshake, or maybe Gold Pass, depending on when you were here. We dropped all that. It's just Handshake. That's the platform that powers our job and internship database for folks. So definitely check that out. I did want to give a shout out that, if you're looking to come back to UMD and work for us, we are looking for several positions, in different fields. Two specific ones I wanted to give a shout out to is Assistant Director for Student Success. and the Bulldog Resource Center, and then mentoring engagement program coordinator for the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. There are many other options. So if you're looking at different ways you want to come back to UMD, just want to throw out that you should go to our website, the employment website. It's the same one for the whole system. But again, thinking of some other industries that you might be looking at, some corporations, you can always go to their website. You can also use LinkedIn. Federal government, USA Jobs is the primary source. It just depends on what you're trying to do. And then again, using that network back to, like, if you want to work at UMD, you have experience here, use the people that you know to connect for tips on how to find the thing that makes sense to you. The other thing, and when thinking about your resume, you have found the things, multiple positions you want to apply to. I like to start out with brainstorming, like, what do I know I have to offer? Where are my key strengths? Where are my key skills and experiences? Things that I really know that I can build upon and talk about in different ways based on what I'm applying to. What I wanted to note about this slide is that this is based off of the top 10 skills of 2025 with the World Economic Forum, and then NACE, the National Association of Colleges and Employers, career competencies. So these are the things that employers are wanting now and into the future as you evolve into whether you're moving up in your same industry or you're switching industries. There's the people skills area, right? How are you learning and working with people from different backgrounds than yourself? What kind of leadership do you have? Change management, those types of things. What are those technical skills that you have to offer, whether that's software, certifications, other languages, web design, all sorts of different technical skills that you have to offer out there. Self-management is huge from a supervisor point of view. I'm going to speak both as a current supervisor in higher ed, but also previously hiring anybody from the intern all the way up to the vice president, hiring thousands of people. Like, this is so key. And if you can illustrate self-management, especially your ability to be flexible and adapt, I think we've all probably have a really strong story about how we've done that over the last 18 months, right? That you can illustrate somehow in your application materials, whether that's your cover letter or in your resume, in your interview questions, really thinking about how you and what you could talk about with your self-management skills. And then, of course, problem solving. Again, in my experience, nothing ever goes smoothly and as planned. So how do you solve those problems when they emerge? How are you preparing for that? Those types of skills that you can illustrate, especially if they are called out in the job announcement, the job description for specific key things that they're looking for. What is an example in your brainstorming that shows that skill rather than just write, I have critical thinking, right? Like, how do you illustrate that in your resume in a bullet point? And then other things I was thinking about this, thinking about transitioning from, I wore a clean pair of Carhartts to work to, like, now I have to suit up, what's that transition, and how do I relate the skills of working outside to working in higher ed and make that a seamless transition, or be able to articulate my skills. Really thinking about the work groups, and committees I was on, how did I help improve the organization that I was at, community involvement, am I volunteering, am I, creating new groups at the organization, or, volunteering at my kids' school, or I'm on the, city council. Like, what are you doing out there? Are you doing any leadership development or training? Maybe you're part of Toastmasters. Maybe you are doing a certificate program or management training program at your current organization. There's all sorts of different ways that you could showcase that. And then any other special initiatives, like you were chosen to be in a group, or like we decided to work on this particular emphasis area. That's another thing, like, oh, I just do these things situation where, like, sometimes forget to put on our resumes. So that's why I'm really a fan of the brainstorming. Don't worry about anything about formatting or like exact words, just put all these things on paper and then work it out. And depending on how far you're out, if you're a recent grad, you graduated maybe in the last 1 or 2 years, those Research, co-op, or internship experiences might be higher on your list than it is. The further you are along on your career, it depends on where you're at. And what kind of position are you doing a resume, or are you doing a CV, and how much information in room do you have to communicate all of these wonderful things that you have to offer. Once you have your huge list, your brainstorm, then thinking about the specifics, like give me some more of the details, context, that who, what, when, where, why, and how often, so I can have a little bit of a better idea of something like tutor versus tutored in algebra for high school students, like the range of information that you're giving me with a brief amount of context, but not so brief that I'm like guessing. From the employer side of things, I don't guess. If I have to guess, I just don't count it, and that's not the end result I think anyone in this room is looking for. So give me enough context that I can go, okay, I can understand that, because the whole goal is that you're trying to get an interview, right? Like you're trying to make me, as the employer who knows you as this virtual piece of paper, interested enough in you to say, let's interview this person, right? So thinking about how to do that. I also want to give a shout out. I see that my assistant director, Sue Holm, is doing a fabulous job in the chat. Thank you, Sue, backing me up as questions keep coming in. So thank you, Sue. The other thing I wanted to mention is thinking about all the things. So being in career and internship services, and I'm a relatively new director. I've been here for 2, working on my 3rd year here. I had more than 1 page worth of experience to put on a resume. But I decided it was in my best interest, as practicing what I preach, to have a 1-page resume to apply for this position, because I tailored it thinking about what was most relevant to what the position was asking for, and then also giving examples of which showed the best range of my skills and the bullet points for each of the positions I showcased. Was it everything I ever did? No. So, please tailor your information as you create your resume. I can't emphasize this enough. Like I just really need to say this one more time. Please tailor your resume, because for me, if you don't tailor your resume, it's like you showed up for an interview in pajamas. Like I sent something and I'm wearing clothes, but like I didn't really care enough to actually edit this so that it made sense and it was easy and relevant to you. So please, please, please tailor your resume. So that probably means you're updating this a lot. It also probably means you have more than one type of resume out there, and that's okay. And it also is evolving. So yes, you might have a resume that has everything that you've ever done, so you can copy and paste when that's relevant. But what you actually turn in is what the person or the employer is looking for. I don't know why people do this, but they forget their education. That's kind of key, minimum qualification for a lot of things. So make sure that's on there. So I put a shout out for that. And as well as including that month of the year. I see a lot of resumes from all levels where people just put a year range. If I'm really being specific about counting your level of experience, if you need 8 years, you need 1 year. If you don't have that month of the year, I don't know how long that is. So you're selling yourself short by not giving me that additional information. I'll show you some examples of it a little bit later here about how to make it easy to read. But as the human who's looking at application materials, when it's easy to read, it just makes such a big difference. When it's not easy to read, I get tired and then I don't want to read it. It's no joke. We'll talk about keywords too, but again, avoiding typos. There's also a link to our website where there's plenty more resume tips. There's no way I can get through all of them in this presentation, but I just wanted to throw out there, these are my top tips about how you can stand out, and it really makes a difference, especially with typos. If you're tailoring your information and you forgot to change where you're applying to and you left that in there, that's a red flag, because it usually is followed with some statement about attention to detail, which already just showed me that you didn't have it because you didn't check all the things. So other people are here to help you use your resources to have other people look at your resume, because after a while I can't find my own errors anymore. Maybe you can, but I always need additional set of eyes. Really want to emphasize keywords. So if I'm doing my due diligence as a employer advertising and wanting to attract you as the employee, I'm giving you some hints about what we are all about, what I'm looking for on my team, things that are important to me, key expectations about the role, and hopefully I've done a nice job putting that information into the job description and the announcement. Some people are really great at that. Some places are not as great and they have some room for improvement. But sometimes you'll see a minimum and a preferred qualifications. Some are like additional responsibilities. Really pay attention to those things and how to emphasize some of those key things, especially if you're really strong in them and they're in the preferred list. Like those are a great way to get yourself that interview. The other thing too about when you're putting the bullet points together, if you have, and you're strong in some of those preferred ones, put those bullet points before the other ones that are just minimum ones. Like I'll get to all of those, but like things you put at the top in each section or in the order on your resume makes me think you think that's the most important thing, right? So how you're telling your story, how I'm interpreting what you're sharing with me is somewhat to do with how you've ordered it on your resume. The other thing too is looking into the website, frequently asked questions, or reaching out to people that are listed in case you have questions about the application process, looking to see what's important to that employer, especially if you're looking at a corporation, a bigger place, the places like the Microsofts and Amazon and Googles of the world, 3M, there's going to be all sorts of different frequently asked questions. They're going to talk about their applicant tracking system and what it allows, what kind of formatting. Like really pay attention to that kind of thing too when you're looking at putting together your resume. Like what might cause my resume to have a page break in it, which might be that line all the way across the resume. It's going to give you some hints, and there typically is a lot of information in those frequently asked questions, and they're there for a reason. So it helps you be more successful in putting together the information for that particular position. Other places, depending on the size, some have more, some have less. And sometimes they just put it in the job announcement, some of those things that will help you with thinking about how to apply. So you have all the things. You've brainstormed. You looked at all of those keywords, and now you're thinking about, here are my personal characteristics that match what they have. Here are my strengths that match what they're looking for. So put those all together. So here's a little bit of the formatting. I don't know what the official name of this is, but I'm a big fan of the tiny vertical line. I'm also a big fan of the white space because, again, the humans reading your information really appreciate having some breathing room to your information, and it's really clear to see. Maybe you're using the all caps, maybe you're using bolding, some italicizing. It just really depends on what you have going on, but I'm a big fan of sans serif fonts because I find them easier to read. But some industries are very specific and want you to use something, and it'll say use New Times Roman in your application materials. Then by all means, follow the directions. If this is not what you normally do, 10 to 12 point font is rule of thumb. Really can't emphasize enough using an email with your name in it. Sad but true stories from applications. I was hiring for a person who was going to be working with children, and they sent their application in with sexykitty@gmail. Couldn't really even open their materials because I was afraid of what I was going to find. So, it's the simple things, the easy things like file saving your document with resume and your name, so that it's not just resume. Thank you for the 10,000 resumes that just say resume. Like that's confusing. Please make things easy for me as the employer to start out. Other just resume things that haven't changed are, putting the most recent first. Please make it relevant. So that means it's okay if you have gaps. Just be prepared if anyone asks you about gaps in employment, that you can say, well, I tailored my resume. I did have another job, but only put the things on here that I thought were most relevant, and you can, explain what job you had for that time frame. The other thing too, if you're a recent graduate and you have gaps in your employment, like that's normal. Like your job was to go to school. So whether it was just completing your undergrad or a master's degree, like I'm assuming you're spending a lot of time with that. So gaps are okay. If gaps are not okay with an employer, you should be asking yourself the question, do I really want to work with this person? Are they the right fit for me anyway, if they can't understand all of the value I'm bringing and just tailoring my information to you? So, remember, this is a two-way street. Is a good fit for you, is a good fit for them. So thinking about that, as well as when you're using the bullet points on your resume, using that past tense action verb. Because as the human who looks at it, the first time I go through, I might be just looking at the action verbs to see, oh my goodness, that's what I'm looking for. And I will also notice if they're all like supervised, directed, created, like everything's created. I created a lot of things. So a little diversity in your word choice. We have a sweet action verb by type of category, like leadership, that give you some sort of different people skill words that if you're like, all I can think of is led. I might have a word crisis. I'm blocked. I can't think of anything else because I've got writer's block. We have resources. I always need inspiration. I get that. What else? Let's see. Oh yeah. So the tough thing with resumes, spoiler alert, is that there's no real actual rules. There's just strong recommendations, things that we've seen are best practices, things that work better than others. So hence the recommendation, if you have under 5 years of experience, 1 page. If you have over that and go to 2 pages, just know that the first page better be the best things. I'm not flipping it over in hopes that the second page is now showing me the good stuff, right? So thinking about how you're prioritizing that information. So I wanted to give you some visuals, because I'm a visual talker and learner, about resumes. So we have this example on our website, and while this information is giving you ideas about what to include in each of these sections, the basic structure of it is to give you an idea on how you might format it. What I wanted to point out is that the one on the left where it says activities, you're like, I have all these things, and you're like, I'm not really comfortable not talking about that, not already talking about where I had that gap in employment. If you wanted to tailor your information in the experience section to the things that are most relevant, you could have things that could say activities or involvement or leadership or whatever you want that heading to be. And then you could just have your title of your position, the employer you worked for, and then the month and year, and then you don't have to tell me anything else about it. And this, you could also put activities, community involvement, all sorts of different things that you have that you do that make you an interesting human. Because I like to work with interesting humans. I have a lot of interesting humans that I work with, so I'm lucky. These are the things that can showcase a lot of things, but not take up a lot of space. That activity section here on the left. The other thing I wanted to point out too with formatting strategies is the skill section. If you're like, oh no, I went to a page and a quarter, I don't want to do that. Putting a bunch of skills together in that section where you start with the languages, technical or certifications, you can get a bunch of things in there without going to a separate page where if you did individual headings for each of this, then you just have a small amount. So that is my words of advice. If you're going to do 2 pages, make it a full 2 pages. But otherwise go with 1 and try to ask questions and feedback, like how can I tailor this more and still showcase information. Other things I want to bring up too, the world of resumes has been evolving maybe since the last time you wrote your resume. What used to be required is an objective. That is no longer required. If you're writing a cover letter, I don't feel like an objective helps you at all, because usually the objective is telling me what you're applying to. If you're writing a cover letter, just feel like you can take that off. Some people have replaced that with a summary or profile, a little bit about, whether it's your goals or philosophy or leadership style. If you're like, I don't like this at all, just don't. don't do that. You don't have to have that at all. So depending on how recently you graduated, you might be starting with education. If it's been a while, maybe you're just starting with experience. So you just really can reorder things as it makes sense to you. The other thing too is that physical addresses are no longer required. That used to be a thing because we used to physically mail. Anyone with me? You had to mail in back in the day your materials. Now, since things are online, I don't need to have a physical address. The caveat to that is I came from a small town that I worked at my previous institution in Durango, Colorado, and if you minimally had Durango, Colorado, or somewhere in the surrounding area, what I already knew about you is that you knew how expensive it was to live there. Two, that you have housing in the area, and that I'm not going to have you really interested, and then you like want to move here and be like, I can't find a place to live, you know. So like sometimes knowing your audience, like or you're from that small town, or you have some sort of connection, then it might be nice to have that part as their physical address so people can see that. But otherwise, you know, phone number and email is great. If you want to include like your LinkedIn, or if you have a portfolio or other website information in your contact info, that's great too. But at a minimum, email, phone, it's all good.
Hey, Jill, a quick question came up as far as, and I think this might be easier to just talk about it, is, you know, what's sort of the best way to display your experience if you've been with the same company for many years and have held many different roles?
Yeah, I can totally relate to that experience. You can do it in multiple ways. You could have each of those experiences broken up. If several of the experiences are similar and like one is different, or they're all pretty similar and it's just a progression to a higher level, you could include like on the left here where it says experience your title on the screen, you could put all your titles and put the month and year for each of those. And then the employer name. And so you can put the bullet points that are relevant, especially if you progress through that. Like I had probably 7 different titles when I was at the Student Conservation Association. Sometimes I just don't list them all and I just put the whole range, and I just talk about the key skills. Sometimes I do list them all depending on what I'm applying to. So there's not one right way. It just depends on what you're trying to showcase of all the experiences. But it would also be totally fine to have them each individually listed. Just depends on what else you're adding. But that's fantastic that you've been at that employer and they're lucky to have you. I hope that answered the question. Is there other questions?
Yes, there was one more that was a little bit earlier because it was too specifically. Did you say to not put year ranges and simply put a number of years when listing length of experience?
Oh, thank you for clarifying. Do put a month, so like August 2020 to present, or August 2020 to July 2021. So yes, put the month and the year so I can know how much that range is. If you just put 7 years, that doesn't help me as much as having the date, because the other thing too that happens, I'm sure everyone's familiar with this and has participated, background checks. So they're going to match that background check to the dates that you have on your resume. So definitely put the actual dates. I don't need to know the day. I don't know who knows the day. Maybe you're very detailed and I am not. So maybe you do know the day. Great questions. The other thing I want to point out between these two here on the screen is that your resume can look like whatever you want. It's just about how easy is it for me to find the information. Are you including the key things that I want to know about, and can I easily read things? The one other thing I want to shout out to that is an unusual thing to remind folks that are recent grads, you might have a relevant coursework section still, because that's where you gained your experiences through that particular course. You might also have projects that you've done while you're at UMD that are totally fine to list as experience. And also activities that clubs and student orgs that you were in, athletics and all those types of things you were involved on campus. could still be on there if you're a recent grad. Here's 2 other examples of resumes. I don't know if you are having an initial reaction, but for me, the one on the left, while it has fantastic information, is stressful for me because there is not enough white space. Like, I just look at that and I'm like, I can't read it all. It's like an essay. Like, I didn't know you're writing me a research paper. Like, I can't handle that as someone who looks at resumes all the time. The one on the right has just a little bit more white space, but that is not the same reaction that I'm getting from that one. I'm like, okay, that's doable. Okay, 1 page of relevant information. The other one, I'm like, ah. So like, there are things that people notice right away who look at resumes all the time. So just thinking about how you might do that. The other thing too, if you're like, I'm not sure if I love my professional summary, is the person on the left has some really great things that they highlighted that you might just have in a cover letter and not have a professional summary. You know, they're like, I've already decided these are the key things that I was going to put in there, but do I need to put it in here? Or do I want to elaborate on that a little bit more in my cover letter? So then that would give the person on the left a little bit more white space, you know, so like, how can you incorporate that to best showcase your skills and abilities? Because again, these documents are also your written communication and showing how well you can do that. The other thing I wanted to point out too on these 2 examples is the person on the right also included their research experience and publication besides coursework. So, you know, those other things out there, please feel like that's relevant to put on there, especially if you're going to build off of some things maybe you haven't done since your undergrad. That would be totally okay, as long as all those skills are still fresh in your mind. The other thing I had too is what I call it the minute to win it test for your resume. If you are the first one for me is printing it out. For whatever reason, I can't find any more mistakes until I print it out, like looking at the computer screen, like everything looks great. And then I'm like, what? What is this? Like, why is there a typo right here? Like, I cannot find it anymore. I don't know, it's because I'm just reading too fast, because that's what I normally do when I'm on a computer. But anyway, that's my test number 1. Print it out and look at it. Test number 2, if you have it printed out, then if you hold it out at arm's length and look at it where you can't actually see the information in detail, do you want to read it? And then test number 3, flip it back over, give yourself 10 seconds, then flip it over again. What did you remember about your own resume, or have someone else do this for you? Like, what sticks out? What is memorable? Because if the thing that people remember the most is that, I don't know, you use check marks as your bullet points, then that's not the message I think you want to be communicating, right? So those are my 3 quick, you know, tests of resumes that are amazing. What you notice, you can't unsee when you're looking at your own resume. So there's just some words of advice. The other thing too, I just wanted to illustrate, and the reason I use these 2 is that the person on the right in this resume and the person on the left, the person on the left is more experienced, so the education dropped to the bottom. The person on the right is a more recent graduate, and their education's from the top. So that's typically in the location where education falls. When I applied to this job, nobody really cared about what my education was, right? I mean, yes, I have to provide my official transcripts and then I have degrees, but that was not the thing that was going to get me the interview. That I had just a degree. As I've got further along in my career, I need to have experience to back up what I'm applying for, especially when you get into leadership experience or a position, to showcase the experience you have. So know that things move around, they evolve. Some things that you were like, I've always been using this, they fall off because now you have something bigger and better as you progress through your career. The other thing I wanted to mention is that you might be doing what I refer to as the job right now. Like, I have to pay bills, right? Like, I had to get a job to pay bills. That might be you. And that's totally fine. Thinking about how you can talk about your job in the relation to what you want to be doing, what you're hoping to be doing, how can you talk about the relationship building you're doing in the current position you're in? Or how can you make this, thinking about how you can make this current job the best job at this time? How can you increase your network and talk to other people and tell them about the things that you're hoping to do in the future and like get inspired. You never know when you're going to find that person that's going to be the person that is the catalyst for change in your life. So, take advantage wherever you are of the opportunities you have out there. I have a friend who met somebody that used to work for Patagonia, and the clothing company helped her launch her woman-owned business and created her own work pants company because she talked to somebody at a coffee shop. So, you never know when you're going to have the conversation that changes your life. So enjoy and take advantage of the things and the people that you meet in your current position. Also thinking about what skills that the place that you're applying to are looking for, and how do you illustrate that without just talking about like, I supervised 5 people, but like how, like who are they, are your peers, how leadership skills transfer across the board, doesn't matter what industry you're in or what field. So I don't care where you learn the skills, just that you apply them and make my life better at my organization as the employer, right? So convince me that you can do that. How are you going to apply that if what you include on your resume? Again, I think we've talked enough about this, how to give some context, some of the things you learned, how you made things better. So user resources, I think I've seen in the chat that you know about our document review, that we have one-on-one appointments, that we have a lot of fantastic things on our website, career and internship services. You probably have other resources in your wheelhouse, whether it's people or resources at your current position. By all means, get advice, meet people, use Handshake and attend career fairs, or come on campus when we're able to have more in-person events and participate. Our things are open to alumni. Really pay attention to the deadlines, applying early if you can. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes you find out about a sweet job and you have 24 hours. So hopefully you did the pre-work and you're ready, you can get it together. And then of course, asking questions, following up with folks, and then feel like you can enter to win. So you're never gonna know if you would have got that job if you never applied. So enter. If you're like, I'm on the fence, I think I have enough, don't figure out, like, you have to decide. The human resources person, the applicant tracking system is going to decide if you made it through the cut to go. So enter to win, because you never know what will come next. You have to try. Just also wanted to point out, if some of you are out there thinking about graduate school, we have a great Canvas resource that's free from our website. There's a link to this. We also have interview practicing tool called Interview Stream. We also practice with folks when they meet with us. I know you all have majors, but sometimes you need inspiration on what to do with your major. If you're like, this is not the right way I want to go, our resource, what can I do with this major, might be helpful, besides other things in Handshake. Like, you can link to Candid Career and Going Global if you're thinking international. Like, there's so many options and resources that we have out of our office. I just really wanted to point out for you to use. And then, of course, if you'd like to schedule an appointment or you have questions, we're going to still have time for questions here. But you can email carserve@d.umn.edu for any of those things. We already talked about Handshake. That's just so I made sure I talked about it. But yeah, what else is out there for questions?
Yeah, thank you so much, Jill. That was an amazing presentation. A lot of great tips and insights. We are now going to transition to our question and answer. There were quite a few questions that were submitted in advance. And so I have a few of them selected, although now is the time. If you do have them, just use the chat box and I will try to keep up. But we're going to kick it off with kind of circling back on with someone that has over 20 years of experience. How do you present in your resume yourself without dating yourself?
I think if you are selective in what you want to. So again, it doesn't have to be everything you have ever done. I talk with faculty about this a lot. I'm like, you might have been teaching for 20, 25 years, but what I want to know is what have you done in the last 5 years, right? Like beyond 5 years, is that relevant anymore? Like, I don't know. I don't know about you. I like 5 years ago myself, I might have had a different idea of where I was going than I do currently, and I've been building to that. So feel like you can put the most recent and not the rest. The other thing too is making sure you're using the most up-to-date terminology, really looking at those keywords, that you're up to date on the evolving software and the different types of apps, and whether it's a customer, whether it's something like Salesforce or other CRMs, or you're up on social media, like you're engaged in how, or you're doing the Zoom meetings, being ready to show that you are up to date with this virtual world. I mean, you're here right now, you're participating in a Zoom workshop, so like I already know that you have a certain level of skill that you're able to function in the virtual hybrid world that we're in. So just, I don't know if that's answering everything, but it's hard without a specific example of like what you want to apply to and what you have to offer. So it could be more of a one-on-one conversation. There's something to be said for a lot of experience and perspective that you bring to the table as well. Like I really respect people with a long work history, that they might bring something that's going to bring value that I never really thought of. I'm like, wow, that's fantastic. So don't discredit the experience either. Like it's important. I hope we all get there, right? Like I hope I have that many years of experience to draw on.
Great, thank you. The next question is wondering about tailoring resumes based on different industries. For example, someone applying for a film or a TV or a theater job might be different from a more kind of standard job. How would you approach that?
Absolutely. So we have a bunch of different template options to look at from our website. If you go to the resume resource on our website. But the thing is to, one of the great ways to look at that is looking at what faculty have done. The other thing to do is like, you can just Google it, but typically like if you're going into more of the creative arts, there are certain formatting, especially like in theater, because you're listing shows, who the director was, what your role was, or maybe your technical side of things, there's definitely different formatting than there is for the resumes that I just showed. That's just more of a standard. And so know that there are industry specific things in the creative fields. If you're more into arts and design, you might have a more creative looking and something you designed in like Illustrator or some other Adobe Creative Suite option, but also a portfolio. So having those additional things in a portfolio might be something that people ask for. Feel like you could have a video as well, if that makes sense. Like people have different expectations for creative fields and different formatting. Thanks, Sue. There's the link in the chat.
Yep, Sue just posted the link. So that's awesome. Thank you. So a really interesting question came in regarding how your LinkedIn profile should reflect and connect to your resume. Should they have the same information? Should they be different? If you have any advice or insight on that.
Full disclosure, my LinkedIn is not up to date, but it's out there. So don't use mine as an example. So what's really great about LinkedIn is that there are tools, there are help documents on how to best do that. It's similar. What's nice about LinkedIn, if you take advantage, so I'm not using LinkedIn right now to find a job. I use more LinkedIn to connect other people. You're able to put project work up there. So you could use LinkedIn as like your portfolio, where it has presentations you put together, links to other documents. whether it's writing samples or a video. So you can use LinkedIn that way. It's probably close. You can have other people that are vouching for your skill set in certain areas. Does it have to have everything? No. I think, I don't know. Sue, do you have anything else that you would want to add about LinkedIn? I'm trying to think about, sorry, I'm on resumes right now.
Yeah, that's okay. No, so I think LinkedIn is, it allows you to expand a little bit more than your resume, right? So if we start thinking about, someone that has more experience, getting concerned about that their resume is too long, that's where you could do an abbreviated version of your, like a one-page resume, and then you can go into more detail on your LinkedIn profile. So that's how I kind of like to use it, is providing that, so you can link to different, websites that you've created or projects that you've worked on, or it can be a little bit more extensive.
And there was a couple questions that came in, and I think you addressed it, but in terms of the amount of pages, myth or legend, it sounds like, I know that Sue had mentioned a little bit and commented in the chat box, but is there one way preferred over the other? And does it depend?
My personal opinion and what I've heard from employers and other search committees, anything beyond 2, I'm not reading. I mean, you haven't been concise enough in your communication to tailor it and make it relevant. Nobody reads beyond 2 pages. So it's true. It's like Phoebe and Friends. I'm telling you the truth, the hard truth. Whether it's 1 or 2, it depends on what other things you're showing. I mean, I can be convinced either way. But if you're putting fluff that's not adding, then I'd stick to 1.
Perfect. And then we actually just got a question in that's kind of interesting. So if you have 2 different email addresses, one that is a Gmail and one that is an AOL, should a person avoid using the AOL address?
Yes.
Dating. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. And in fact, I have a friend who is a recruiter for a healthcare system. And he said, if I see Hotmail, I'm like, seriously, you still use that? So Gmail. Yes.
Let's see.
Or, also, I mean, if you, just go Gmail.
Perfect. And then another question, wondering about sending your resume directly to the hiring manager, if that's appropriate, preferred, if your resume is actually being seen by people and not the computer or robot.
I think it's gonna strongly depend on the size of the organization and their directions. So if you only send it there and the directions are you apply online, then you're not getting considered because you haven't followed the HR protocols so that they can have it all through their system. I mean, there's usually some things in the system where you're checking, I vouch that this is all true information, part of the application process online. It's another thing if there's not a posted position and you're putting your information out there saying that you're interested in an opportunity, that's a different situation than if there was something posted and then you went a different direction. I hope that makes sense.
It definitely does. And there was another question that came in before, a little bit more specific, but wondering if there's an easy way to transfer information from a military bio sheet to a standard resume.
I don't know if easy, but there are resources. I don't have that off the top of my head, the link to it, but there are tools to do that. We can also help with that, with the conversion as well, and like how to highlight it and talk about it in the civilian terms, for sure.
Perfect. And I actually think that might be a good spot to end, knowing that there are a lot of personal questions and this isn't one size fits all. I think it's safe to say that appointments are available for alums if they would like to either submit their resume to Career Services, and one of your staff would be willing to review them, and so that carserve@d.umn.edu is your email. But also that appointments are available for alums if they would like to do a deeper dive into some of these more specific questions. But I think with that, we will end our session today. Thank you both to Jill and Sue for your expertise. Also, if this was useful and helpful, we have another session coming up on negotiation. So once you get that next job, negotiation, those needs and those wants that Jill talked about in the beginning, you might want to tune in. That's coming up in January, led by Sue and another one of their colleagues. So with that, we will end today, but thank you both and everyone for joining. We hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.